Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to be going over 1099s, what's needed in 2025. I have a litany of things, but I want to introduce our guest first. It's Troy Butler. He's an accountant, and he's a tax supervisor here at Anderson Business Advisors. So first off, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go over what we're going to do today. We're going to go over what is a 1099 and why does it exist. We're going to go over what are the main types of 1099s, what they are, what they're used for. Who has to send a 1099? What form do you need from a vendor to actually send out a 1099? This is one that gets missed a lot. What is the dollar threshold that triggers the 1099? You'll see there's going to be some movement on some of these next year. Do I have to send 1099s to corporations? If I pay someone via credit card, PayPal, Venmo, does it change anything at all? Do I still have a requirement to send? And then what is the 1099K rule, and how did the One Big Beautiful Bill change it? And then what are the relevant deadlines and penalties? And then what are best practices for filing? So that's what we're going to go over. So let's dive in, because I don't want to waste Troy's time here, and I want to make this concise for you all. Let's do this. What is a 1099? Why do they even exist?
Right. So 1099s are a way, or you can almost think of them like a receipt to contractors, right? Like you're sending a 1099 to a contractor saying, hey, I paid you this amount, and that lets the IRS know to expect that income to be reported on their tax return.
Now you say contractors. Is it just like a typical contractor, service provider, attorneys, hospital? What's the world? Is it anybody you give a 1099 to?
Yeah, it's pretty much anyone that's doing business for you and providing a service, right? There are some rules and regulations of people you don't have to send 1099s to, but in corporations and entity types that you might not have a filing requirement for, but you won't know that until you collect some more information.
All right, so if I pay somebody, and the threshold is what, around $600?
$600.
All right,
Yep.
so we'll get into that in a second too. But if I am paying somebody to do something for me that is business related,
Correct.
or investment related, right?
Right.
Then I need to send them a form saying, here's what I paid you. I'm taking it as a deduction, but I'm going to send that third party a form saying to the IRS, I paid them this.
Right, exactly.
And we'll get into all the nastiness if you don't do it. All right, so I am paying a third party. Is this the same thing like if I have a babysitter, do I have to 1099 them?
No, because a babysitter isn't going to be a business deduction,
There
right?
you go. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if it's business, so if I'm a landlord, I'm paying contractors, I'm paying third parties, electrician or whatever, I'm probably going to have to send them a 1099.
Most likely, yes.
All right.
One caveat to that, and this is a question we get a lot, is I paid someone to renovate my home, right, that I live in. Do I need to send those contractors a 1099? And the answer is no, because it's not a business deduction.
All right.
Should you keep your receipts and all that? Absolutely. Different discussion, though.
All right, let's dive in to the different type of 1099s that are out there.
So the main one is going to be called a 1099 NEC, which stands for non-employee compensation. This is going to be the one that you're issuing to contractors, freelancers, maintenance people, so on and so forth. That's going to be the most common one that we see.
A 1099
NEC,
non-employee, okay, sorry.
Yeah, non-employee compensation, right.
All right, what are the other ones?
Next one is a 1099 miscellaneous, or MISC, M-I-S-C. That's going to be for things like rent, attorney fees, and other miscellaneous payments. There's all sorts of different things, but those rent and attorney fees are going to be the main two that we see.
And you always have to send a 1099 to your lawyer, right?
Correct, every time, right.
Yeah, and medical providers. Yeah?
Correct, right.
All right, so we'll get to that in a second, guys. All right, what are the next?
Next one is a 1099 INT, which stands for 1099 interest. So for any interest you paid for private loans or shareholder loans, you're going to want to make sure that you're issuing that 1099 INT.
And you said shareholder loans.
Yes.
Yeah, so you guys are making sure that.
Correct. If you have a loan to your corporation and you are making payments or aren't making payments, you got to make sure that you're charging interest so it's a bona fide loan and we're issuing that 1099 INT. So the IRS knows that this is a loan, this isn't a capital contribution.
Right, because otherwise you fall into the next category.
Right, which is a 1099 div or dividend, DIV. It's again for dividends you distribute from a corporation.
Okay.
So a dividend, just in case you didn't know, is If you have a C corporation, you can't readily take money out of that C corporation. So you get charged a dividend, which is not an expense to the corporation, but it is income to you. So
Corporation makes money. If it's a C corp, it pays tax at 21%. If there's money left over and it pays it out to the shareholders, it's a dividend. If it's a qualified dividend, it's taxed as long-term capital gains, but we don't. Topic for another day. What else are there?
There's a 1099-S, and that's for real estate sales. Usually your title company is going to handle that. We don't see very many people needing to issue a 1099-S.
Okay, and then let's talk about the one that seems to get a lot of press, which is the 1099.
1099-K.
K.
Yeah, and that is for electronic payments, things like PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, things like that. The processor is going to be the one that issues that. So we don't need to issue 1099-Ks. Those are going to be handled for us.
Is this the same? So if I'm paying somebody with a credit card, Venmo, PayPal, any of those, then I don't have to 1099 them?
Correct, right. So only if you're using a cash, check, or ACH would you really need to issue a 1099. If you're sending it via, again, credit card or debit card or PayPal, Venmo, whatever it may be, the merchant is going to handle that on your behalf. It's
And
gonna
just
do a
be thinking about
1099-K.
that, guys, for operations. If you're paying somebody, a lot of folks, the point people are like, pay it on a credit card, pay it on a credit card. Now you're going to hear it from the accountant who's basically saying, hey, you take away some compliance stuff. You don't have to do a 1099 at the end of the year.
Yep.
Or at the beginning of the next year.
Right.
Yes.
Makes it a lot simpler.
All right. That's probably the vast majority that most people run into.
Right.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
there are a lot of other ancillary forms, but those are few and far between.
Yeah, there's over 20 types of 1099s, but this, I think we just hit probably 95% of them. All right. Who has to send a 1099?
So everyone who is doing business and hires outside services, they need to issue a 1099 to those people with some caveats, right? But if you're doing business and you're hiring contractors, chances are you need to issue a 1099.
So let's just, I'm going to give you some scenarios. Landlord. I own property. I'm paying people. I pay a manager. I pay contractors. I have to send 1099
Correct,
to these people.
absolutely.
All right. What if I have a property manager that I contact through and they're doing all the hiring and then they just take it out of my rent?
Sure. So if the property manager is the one that's hiring the people, has the contract with the repairman, say, and they are paying the repairman and then deducting that from whatever they're going to send to you at the end of the month, they're going to be the one to issue the 1099.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that's, I just want to be clear on that. If there's a name on the check, right, on the top corner, and it's the property manager, they're going to be the one sending the 1099. If it's the name on the check is you, and they're just saying, hey, issue a check over here to pay this person, you're issuing the 1099. And if it's a deduction, if you're deducting this thing, chances are you're 1099ing it.
Right.
All right. We'll get into some exceptions to this stuff later, but what form do you need from somebody? So I have a contractor, and they're going to do work on my property. What form do I need from them so I can send them a 1099?
Yep, this is probably the most important part of the entire process. We need to collect a form W-9 from anyone that you're sending money to. Before you write a check, before you give them any information, get a W-9.
And I would say that if they invoice you, you say, fill out this form and then I'll pay you. That's it. Because I've gone through this where we've done 1090, where we had payroll audits and there's 1099 or W-2, and they're saying, I need the W-9 on anybody that you paid a check to.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's how they operate. And going after the fact?
It ends poorly almost every time. If you're after the fact, hey, it's in December now, and you're trying to collect W-9s, it's a lot harder to get a hold of those people that you sent money to throughout the year.
Some go out of business, some just don't respond. But in order to do a 1099, so what you're going to need, the legal name, the address of the person, and their tax ID, like what's their federal employer identification number or their social security number if you're paying and they're just an individual, and then what type of entity they are.
Correct.
And this is important. We'll get into that in a second.
So again, before you write a check, collect that W-9. Cannot stress that enough.
Yeah,
Very
so
important.
We're going to call that a pro tip.
Yeah.
Make that W-9 collection part of the onboarding process for that vendor. Hey, I am not cutting you a check until you fill out this form. And by the way, it takes all of 5 minutes to fill out that form.
Right.
Less than that, probably 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I know a lot of places have them already filled out, and they just make a copy and send that over to who's ever requesting it.
All right, next question. What is the dollar threshold that triggers the 1099 in 2025? I'm going to say in 2025 because...
Yeah, for 2025, it's $600 for a 1099 NEC. So yeah, if you pay a vendor more than $600, you need to issue them a 1099.
And is that going to change?
That is going to change for the 2026 tax year. It's going to be going up to $20,000, right?
Or 2,000?
Or 2,000. I'm sorry, 2,000. Sorry.
One big beautiful. You're thinking of the 1099K.
1099K, yeah.
Which is there's a different threshold for PayPal and Venmo
Yeah.
and these others, but for us regular folks, and is it all 1099s or just a few of them?
So that's going to be for the NEC and the miscellaneous. The 1099 INT, the current threshold is $10, so much lower than on an NEC or MISC.
So if I'm paying interest to somebody, $10 and I need to do it, so
Right.
it's not even a $600, it's a $10. So if you're paying interest to somebody, just give them the 1099.
Right.
Yeah, I'm deducting it. You have to recognize it. All right. Here's a big question that we get all the time. Do I have to send 1099s to corporations?
Typically, no, but as always, when we're dealing with the IRS, it depends, right? If, like you mentioned earlier, if you're paying your attorney and they are a corporation, you still have to issue a 1099. If you paid with a check or cash or ACH, if you paid with credit card or Zelle or whatever, not Zelle, Venmo, then you don't need to worry about it. The 1099K will work. Same with medical professionals.
What about Zelle? Like you're saying Zelle is different.
Zelle is different. That's considered a transfer.
That's
right?
considered a check or ACH.
Right.
So you're responsible if you're going Venmo, PayPal, credit card.
Because Zelle is kind of just an extension of your bank, right? It's just a way for them to send money to and from banks. So.
Right. So here's the deal. If you're paying a corporation, technically you don't have to 1099 them. But I've been down this path with clients, I've been down this path with my own businesses. You have to prove that they're a corporation.
And how do you do that?
You better have the W-9.
Better have the W-9.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, you're sitting there fighting with the IRS, and I've done this. You're sitting there, they're incorporated, they're in default, they've dissolved, we don't know, or it's a different name and they're doing a DBA. You got all these fun things, and you're like, it was a corporation. They'll happily double dip on y'all. Like they could be paying the tax on their end, but they're going to hit you with a 24% withholding plus penalties.
So, and that's a great point too, Toby. If you don't have that information, does that mean you don't have to file a 1099? And the answer is no, you still have to file a 1099 for that amount paid, and then you're going to get a notice from the IRS saying, hey, you sent this without the proper information. Any payments that you make to this contractor going forward, you're going to have to withhold 24%.
And I had this happen on it was a doctor's office that was paying all these folks, and they were not collecting the Social Security number, but they were 1099ing the vendors without their federal employer identification number, without their EIN.
Yep.
And the IRS said withholding on all of it. And we were able to go back in and retroactively go in and get all this information, but it was a pain. All right. So you don't have to send it to corporation, but pro tip, send it to everybody.
Yep.
You're like, it's easy. Once you make this part of your operations, it's just, I'm just going to send these. Here's all the people I paid. Report run. Use a good accountant like Troy here, somebody to actually just make sure that you have somebody who set it up so it's easy for you, and then sending 1099s is not a big deal, which we'll get into. All right, if I pay somebody via a credit card, PayPal, Venmo, does that change anything? I mean, it sounds like we already answered some of that. It does, but just give it again.
So again, if you pay with a credit card, debit card, something like that, the merchant is going to be the one the merchant services are going to be the one to issue the 1099. It's going to be a 1099K, so you don't need to worry about issuing a 1099 for that.
Right, so here's the easy way to look at it. If you paid via check, cash, ACH, Zelle, you are responsible. You paid them, and it's probably going to be a 1099 NEC or miscellaneous.
Correct.
If you paid it on a credit card or PayPal or Venmo, then that person is doing a 1099K to the recipient. You do not have to do anything. You can
Correct.
sit on your hands. And then what about like crypto and things like that?
So yeah, if you did send crypto to someone, you would need to send a 1099 for the value.
That's cash.
Yeah, it's like cash, and you would for the value of the coin at the date that you sent it is when.
And here's how it works. If I send Troy crypto, the IRS says you sold that crypto, turned it into US dollars, then gave it to Troy, and then Troy may have bought more crypto with it, right? That's the way they look at it, that there was actually 2 transactions going in and 2 transactions going out. And we just think of it, I just paid Troy with crypto. No, we have to turn that into US dollars, report it, then Troy is taking it, is receiving US dollars, and now it's back into crypto.
Right.
That's
So
the way they treat it.
It's going to be a taxable event at that point too, right? With the Zelle?
It would be a taxable event. Yeah, it absolutely is. So you have to track what's my basis in it. Do I have to? Yeah. So whenever somebody buys something with crypto, I'm always like, you just sold the crypto. Imagine that you had Microsoft shares and you said, I want to buy a car and I'm going to pay it in Microsoft shares. They would say, no, we're not going to do it. You would sell the Microsoft shares, turn it into dollars, and then give it to them. And they could go right back out and invest it in Microsoft. When you're doing a crypto transaction, the IRS says, we're going to make you peel that back, right? Even though they take the crypto, it's no different. It's a capital asset, no different than Microsoft shares. They're just going to treat it as though you sold it and that whoever got it went and bought it again. All right, let's go back in. Let's talk about this 199K rule under the One Big Beautiful Bill, because guys, we had some crazy stuff over the last 2 years where they wanted the threshold. Like, if I went to Home Depot, I'm going to have to report it.
Yeah, it was wild.
It was, and if I pay anything with PayPal, I have to report it. And then they came back and in the One Big Beautiful Bill, fix this. What is the rule?
Yep. So for now, the rule for 2026 is that it will be. I'm sorry, for 2025, the 1099K will be issued for $20,000 or 200 transactions, and 200 transactions, right? So you have to receive $20,000 worth of income via debit card, credit card, whatever it may be, and then you also have to have 200 transactions, and then they will issue the 1099K.
Okay, but is that amount switching at all for 2026 or anything?
So that started in 2025.
So we don't have to worry about 2026.
Correct.
There's
right.
nothing else. They were trying to move it down to $600, just so you guys know. So now we're set.
Right.
It's the old $20,000 and 200 transactions.
Yeah, and if it was $600, you help your family with their rent 1 month, they're going to get a 1099K, right? But with this new change, that helps a lot.
So like, if the only reason this is relevant is because if you're doing a bunch of transactions with PayPal, expect that they might start issuing out a 1099 and this is an and test, not an or. It's 200 transactions and it's $20,000 and above.
Right.
All right, and that's indexed for inflation, so that could move all over the place. But we don't really have to worry about that as regular folks,
Right.
unless you are receiving.
Unless you're the receiver.
Yeah, because then you're going to get a 1099, and you're like, wait a second, I'm just doing friends and family. They're issuing it to you. You're still going to have to report it and deal with it. All right. What are relevant deadlines and penalties?
Sure.
So I'm just going to set the table for you real quick. So I am somebody, I have a business, I know I have to send out 1099s. When do I have to do it?
So as always, it depends, right? So if you're doing a 1099 NEC, those have to be filed and sent to the recipient by January 31st.
So we have to be on this, guys.
Right.
You have until the end of January to not only file it with the IRS, but also send it to the recipient.
Right.
That's going to send some chills down some folks, right?
And then if we're doing a 1099 miscellaneous, has to be sent to the recipient by January 31st. You do get a little more time to file it with the IRS. That's going to be, if you're doing it by paper, it's going to be February 28th or March 31st if you're doing that via electronic filing.
All right, and I'm just going to say, the miscellaneous is if you're paying rents, attorneys, right, miscellaneous payments, and that NEC is non-employee compensation. So that NEC, we have a much shorter deadline. So if you're paying contractors, end of January. If you're paying attorneys or other rents, I have to give them Because they have a right to actually respond.
Right.
Yeah, so they usually the deadline is what, March or something? Or end of February?
If it's if it's going to be a partnership or a S corp, their filing date is March 15th.
Not the filing date for this, but if I send somebody a 1099, they have a right to respond to me, right?
Oh, yes. Yep. So that's why you have that extra time to file it with the IRS, right? So you have until February 28th if you're paper filing, or March 31st for e-filing.
And so e-filing actually gives you an extra
month.
Yeah, an extra month. Just note that. You have extra time to file that 1099 miscellaneous. This is only for the miscellaneous, so long as you're e-filing. Otherwise, you're going to be doing this during January, guys. Like again, I'm trying to make this like, hey, I have some extra time. No, just get it all done by the end of January. What are the penalties if you don't do it?
Yep. So it can be $60 per form, up to $310 per form, depending on what form it is. And then it can be as high as $630 per form with no cap on it. If the IRS determines you did this on purpose, you decided to say, doesn't apply to me, I'm not doing it, they can charge you $630.
And that's regardless of how much you have to pay the party?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a pretty nasty penalty, guys. So get your 1099s out. And I know there's people out there freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
You just heard that. Wait a second. I have to pay $60 to $300 if I negligently don't file, but I could get hit with $630 more and plus.
Yep.
If they say, hey, you knew and you just didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, have you ever seen that?
I have seen it. The IRS usually is more lenient than on 1099 penalties than other penalties. However, that doesn't mean they don't have the right to do it.
Yeah.
And I have seen them. I've seen tens of thousands of dollars in penalties before.
They could absolutely clamp down on you and start using it to, especially if you're in some sort of contentious audit.
Right.
You don't want them to have that as a tool. All right. So this could apply both to the both parties, right? The party that receives it and us. Like, so we can only control ourselves. Let's make sure that we get those things out by the end of January. I'm just going to give you guys all a deadline. And let's do this. How do I file, and what are best practices? And I'm just going to say, get it done by the end of January.
Absolutely.
But what do you say?
Yep. So make sure you're collecting your W-9s. That's the number one tip. Get your W-9s up front. Get everything filed by January 31st. Get it all sent to the contractors. If you have bookkeeping, it makes your life much easier to be able to pull those numbers. Make sure you're doing your bookkeeping throughout the year, so we're not struggling at the end of December, beginning of January to get those numbers done.
Track those payments, in other words. Make sure you know what you're paying your vendor. If you're in QuickBooks, it's easy.
You say this person is a contractor.
Is it really easy to do it?
It's so easy.
So when we're doing your book, so if you're using us, how hard is it to do 1099s?
It's so easy. It's literally when we set up a vendor, we'll say this one is eligible for a 1099, this one is not. This one is, this one's not.
And then in January you press
a button, it generates a report, and then we generate the 1099s.
And then we e-file that.
Correct.
And then you can also send notice to the party, the recipient.
Correct.
So you're e-filing it with the IRS, you're sending the notice to the recipient, and you're done.
Yep. You will want to make sure that you're separating out any cash and credit, check payments versus credit card payments, so we know what needs to get reported on a 1099 versus what's going to get reported on a 1099K. Again, having good bookkeeping makes that easy. You're going to want to review the totals in December, not January. We want to make sure that we know what we're going to have to issue.
Do this before the end of the year.
Yep.
When you close your books out at the end of the year, it just makes it so much simpler.
Right. And then you're going to want to keep those copies for 4 years just in case of audit.
Yeah, because audits happen, they go back 4 years from the date or 3 years from the date that you file.
Right.
So you could be looking at, we just had one where it was going all the way back. It was 4 years. And the records were difficult to ascertain because they were like, oh, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years, we're done. No.
Yeah.
Make sure you keep those.
Keep those copies.
Yeah, otherwise you could have a little bit of work for yourself. All right, can you do this for me? And how much does it cost? Because everybody's hearing all this complexity. They're thinking ka-ching, ka-ching. What does it run?
Yep, so we can absolutely do it for you. We charge $100 for up to 10 1099s per entity. So if you have a C Corp and an S Corp, those would be two different entities. But it doesn't matter if it's an NEC or a miscellaneous or an INT, that would be included in the 10.
And this is for Anderson clients, so they need to be an Anderson client.
Correct.
So if you want to become an Anderson client, I'll put a link in the show notes where you can go and request a consult. But this is what we do for our people.
Absolutely.
Right? And so let's say that you have 5 NECs, 10 miscellaneous, and a few smattering of others. How does that run?
Yep, so that would be above our usual threshold of 10. So we're just going to charge you hourly, and it's a pretty fair rate. It's $100 per hour.
So in other words, figure this, for each company, you're talking $100 probably per company. If you have a bunch of vendors, maybe it's going to be $200.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even if you have 50 vendors, a lot of times we can get that done in an hour. So,
all right, so I'm going to put a link in there. I want to say thank you. Let's look at all the things that we covered here. We went through a ton. Let me just kind of go over them. We went over what the 1099 was, why it exists. We went over the thresholds. We said who has to send them. We went over what kind of reporting is needed just so I can send it, and what the
threshold,
the 1099K rule, what the changes are under the One Big Beautiful Bill, and how do I file, and some best practices. So we hit all those today. Thanks, Troy.
Of course, happy to be here.